Speaker, Mr. Speaker, David and Abs wanted to characterise this debate as one where it's fine to be able to have religious practices regardless of what the child may want in the future because, hey, they're kids, right? And parents necessarily know what's better for them. That is crap. What we're going to bring you on the closing side of this debate is why it is fundamental for a person to be able to opt out of their culture, and why it is that when you circumcise a child, you force them to carry around a physical manifestation of a culture that they may not believe in, that they may find abhorrent in later on in life. And then secondly, I'm going to explain why the government has the right to be able to regulate acts of religion and they don't have this omnipotent power that Abs and David wanted to start. So let's get straight down to it. The ability to opt out of culture. Why must we have the ability to opt out of our religious and cultural practices to what we were born in? Well, because firstly, Madam Speakers, religion is something that is inherent to who you are and goes so far as to actually define who you are as a human being, right? This is why we actually promote, no thank you, the ideals of the separation between the church and the state in the first time. Because we recognise that no government has the right to perpetuate a cultural ideal and norm upon its citizens, right? Like, you undermine this principled practice, no thank you, that we hold so dear in the first place when you force a child to carry around that physical manifestation of of a religious practice or a cultural practice which they themselves have not chosen to do. We think that's extraordinarily important. No thank you. So, I just wanted to say, well, you know, like, it's fine because parents are able to make that decision for them, right? One, parents cannot decide, like, what it is that their child will believe or will decide or the cultural practice that they will want to deal with when they become an adult.
John Safran got surgery to reverse his circumcision that he received as a child. They attached weights to the skin around your penis and it stretches the skin and your foreskin is restored. How is it not a reversible procedure and therefore all of your analysis about how you want to choose something else in the future is just wrong?
Okay, firstly, like, I don't think that any penis is going to look the same after they've gone through that incredibly detailed description you just gave. But moreover than that, right, the fact that it has now scars, right, of like the foreskin that is growing back on the penis, right, we think is still a constant reminder to that individual about the cultural practice that he has had physically mandated on him, right, that may often go against that culture that he wanted in the first place. Like that's not going back to where they started in the same place. Even so, you still made them live with like a circumcised penis for like however many years that they've had it for. And we think that's an incredible harm that they don't want to deal with, right? But like, in response to what Abs wanted to tell us, right, we don't think that like, they said, well, it's fine, right, because like they have to live unclean for 18 years, and that's an incredible harm, right? We think that's a fundamental misunderstanding of Judaism, Madam Speaker. We don't think that Judaism is only like an opt-in religious practice if you have a circumcised penis, right? We think you can still, no thank you, teach the practices of that religion. We think you can still teach them about God, and you can still teach them about the benefits of like believing in that God, right? Like, even if it is true that you cannot actually become a practicing Jew to have a circumcised penis, we say good, because that means, yeah, as Shaiwan Lu would do. No, because that says Shaiwan Li, because that says, or whatever the fuck his name is, because that says, right, that child, like, where it goes towards the idea of consenting to that religious practice over 18 years of age when they're able to do so. We think that is a great thing, right? Moreover than that though, Madam Speaker, we say that we don't allow this to happen in any other circumstances, right? We don't allow you to be physically branded with a cultural practice when you are a kid and unable to consent to following those practices forevermore. No thank you. So for instance, in like many southern Brazilian tribes, right, we've outlawed the practice of branding women like with that cultural symbol because of the connotations that that symbol has, right? That symbol says to that woman in that culture that she is forever someone who is subservient to men. No thank you. In that culture. We think that there are similarly true things about circumcising a penis, right? We think it's not just you have like a physical like penis and you look at that and you says, hey, I'm a Jew, right? We think it goes a lot further. We think David missed the point. The problem is that when you have to look at a penis that has been circumcised that you recognize as your own, but then you don't sometimes, but then you don't recognize, Madam Speaker, the connotations that come with that, right? They are the connotations of Judaism, right? This means you believe in very specific religious practices. You believe in a certain God, Madam Speaker. You believe in like not being able to eat pork because it is unclean. You believe you are the chosen people, right? We think some people will want to opt out of that belief. We think some people will not believe that a God exists, or even worse, will believe that a different manifestation of that God exists, right? We think that the harm in this situation is you now have an individual who has to look and has to like on the first hand, sees something that he sees as intrinsic to himself being his physical manifestation of his body, but that cannot correlate to the other intrinsic part of himself being the practices that he believes in, the God that he worships, right? We think the two are mutually exclusive. We think that becomes an incredible harm then, Madam Speaker, when you get into a situation where that person cannot correlate his physical body with his religious body, right? Like, it's similar to what we see, I'll take you in a second, with like dysmorphia of the body, right, where somebody does not understand that the arm that is theirs, right, is actually theirs. We think that you have incredible harms when you have to look at that every day. Pete?
Isn't your whole setup based on the fact that the only harm from this is that they can't walk away from their religion? But doesn't that belie the fact that it isn't just religious people who are getting this done, and that there are a myriad of reasons why you would want to get it done anyway?
Sure, and they can make those decisions when they turn 18, right? Like, we think the only compelling reason that has come out on your side of the bench is the fact that there happens to be a religious cultural practice, right? Like, we think, like, that is where this debate lies, right? We think if someone thinks that it looks awesome and help them pick up chicks, they can do that when they turn 18, right? Like, we don't want to condone, like, 5-year-olds having sex anyway. Anyway, secondly, the last reason on a physical representation of why it's bad, Madam Speaker, is because we think that, like, when you have to deal with that every day, we think that, like, you have that dichotomy between you yourself as a physical being and, like, and the manifestation of yourself as a spiritual being. And we think that that is often something that's going to, like, manifest itself in very, very harmful ways. So secondly, why is it that the government can regulate acts of religion, right? This is something that actually hasn't come out yet. Because we think that no religion is outside of regulation, Madam Speaker, right? We see, for instance, that we ban practices such as animal slaughter because of the, like, detriments firstly to that animal, but more than that to the, like, social attributes that we have to animal slaughter, and why this isn't a practice that we want to condone generally, right? Like, we don't think that we want normal parents to be able to cut the tips off their baby's penis just because they think that that's funsies, right? Like, we think that we should therefore be also stopping it from happening under the pretense of a religious practice, because that is a social connotation that we don't want to have. But moreover than that, Madam Speaker, we think that governments step in all the time into religious ideals, and we think that it's absolutely something they have to do when you have a situation where a child who is unable to, like, state its objection to that practice and may object to that practice at a time where it can consent, we think the government absolutely has a duty to step in there. So because, Madam Speaker, we need the ability to opt out of our culture, and because a physical manifestation of a culture does not allow you to do that, we must propose the motion.
So you have a spare pen